Host the ultimate backyard barbecue with Whole Foods Market. It's the hot grill summer event through July 16th with sizzling sales on no antibiotics ever boneless beef ribeye steak and beef New York strip steak. Plus, check out sales on sustainable wild-caught Alaska sockeye salmon, organic strawberries, and more. In a hurry? Choose grab-and-go favorites like picnic salads and sushi, plus plenty of cooler-friendly beverages. Make it a hot grill summer at Whole Foods Market.
The following is an exclusive presentation of News Radio KMAN, your home for K-State Athletics. It's game time. This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.
Boy, talk about a lazy Friday where there's just nothing going on, I tell you. I mean, just quiet all the way around. It's not like the world #1 golfer is about to miss the cut at the U.S. Open this weekend. College World Series underway, no big thing. NCAA, or I should say, NBA Finals could end tonight. Yeah.
Stanley Cup could end tomorrow night. Yeah.
Talk about two lousy series there.
Two very disappointing series. I figured Edmonton would at least put up a fight in that series.
Oh, wait. What's this? Honestly, about 8:45 this morning, things began to bump up on the Twitter sphere. And it was not very long after that we learned that one Coleman Hawkins first had canceled his trip to LSU that was coming up. And the recruit that had been into Manhattan last weekend, well, soon after that, made it all but official. His name's not on the paperwork yet, but he has committed to K-State basketball. The NIL number is unreal. We'll touch a lot on that coming up in the next 2 hours. But because of timing of things, want to take a moment and we're going to go to the phones because something else that's going on is that the executive board of the State High School Activities Association continues to make some changes to what the postseason future is. And among them, one that could impact Manhattan in some way. And Kyle Doporalski, the assistant executive director of the Kansas State High School Activities Association, joins us. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you coming on to talk about these changes. It surprised me a bit yesterday when the release came out that the executive committee has elected to look towards trimming basketball's state sites to 4 while keeping its classifications at 7. Means it's going to be very busy times at those 4 sites when that takes place in 26.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it, Troy. It's great to be on with you, and I appreciate the opportunity to come on with you. And is this the first time we've actually got to be on the same air together? I mean, we've been on competing airs a few times in ball games, but I think this is the first time together, right?
Yes, that is correct. Yes, you and I mean, come on. With you doing TV for so long up north, I mean, you were the show.
Yeah, well, it was in radio mixed in. We were on the opposite ends of the score table for several of those games when you were at Northern Colorado. And
yes.
Northeast Kansas is really lucky and fortunate to have you back, and excited that you're back in the area working here.
Thank you, Kyle. I appreciate that. But what prompted this discussion even of a change with the high school state tournament setup?
Yeah, let's go back almost a couple of years ago. So I started here in July of 22. And not long after that, in that fall of 22, one of the questions that our executive director, Bill Faflick, took on the road with him every October, he goes out to 8 or 9 different places, and regional administrator meetings is what they're called, and surveys the membership. Schools are there from all sizes, big and small, in eastern Kansas, western Kansas, depending on where he's at around the state. And there's a number of questions that he asked. And and he doesn't come up with the questions. Those questions come from various different committees and conversations. But one of those was, what does the membership think about consolidating some of the classes and putting them together at state sites rather than having several different sites around the state? And in that survey, the majority of the membership wanted consolidation. And so since then, as you've noticed with football and soccer, those sites have consolidated, and then basketball is just another step along that trajectory. So that's when it kind of started with the consolidation of sites. And as you know, you've been around a few different states. Kansas is unique in the fact that every class had its own site, and that can be, good or bad depending on how you look at it. But the membership back in the fall of 22, the majority of the membership wanted to take a look at some things, and that's where the executive board landed yesterday.
One of the things that it will do is put pressure on communities, though, in terms of having the space, the hotel rooms, and the restaurants available for being able to host multiple sites, won't it?
Yeah, and I would say that's already happening in some of the communities that we go to with 7 sites. I mean, it is difficult at that time of year to find. In some years are different than others. Like last year is a great example. K-State Athletics, and I don't blame them, said, hey, we want to have a home game the last week of the regular season. Well, the NCAA calendar and the KSHSAA calendar did not match up. And so therefore the 2A tournament, which is traditionally home in Manhattan, was not in Manhattan last year. And so that's just an example of things are fluid from year to year, but that caused a ripple effect down the line, which means that we needed to go find yet another site, and we did. And Colby was great for Class 1A Division I. They did a fantastic job, but that's a community, and there's a couple of others that I think that are in that boat already. So it certainly will be interesting to see how it all plays out, and you could certainly take that approach, but I would say that's already happening in some cases.
The other aspect of that is also then trying to schedule, because the classifications are going to remain the same. That means still 7 classes. So by the time you have 8 teams for boys and 8 teams for girls, plus multiple tournaments at a site, you're going to be seeing a lot of basketball being played at those sites.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. And the reason that one of the reasons that basketball was a year or so behind football and soccer in this conversation was one of the questions that Bill asked, I believe it was last fall, was what does the membership think about taking 4 teams to the final site instead of 8? And the membership overwhelmingly supported keeping it at 8. And so trying to navigate that along with the 7 classes, and as you know, being in other states, we play our boys and girls together, which I think is fantastic. But when you add all of those different elements together, it certainly complicates trying to do certain things when it comes to consolidation. And you're right, it's going to be wall-to-wall basketball for those days. And keep in mind that we're already contracted for 25. So this coming school year, it'll be business as usual with the 7 sites. And heading into the 25-26 school year, about a year from now, is when, news will start to come out and those sites will be selected. We haven't identified that timeline or what that's going to look like yet, just with the board meeting yesterday. But I just want to make that clear that what we're talking about right now does not come into effect until March of 2026.
Kyle Doporowski with KSHSAA along with us here on The Game as we talk about some changes that are coming to the state basketball tournaments in 26. You brought up the fact that football will make that shift this year coming up in the fall to where it is 3 different sites that will be utilized to contest the total of 9 classifications that take place. And Emporia being the one for 6, 5, and 4, but it puts you in a spot where you've got a Friday afternoon game taking place both in 6A as well as then down at Hutch. You'll have afternoon game there and an afternoon game on that Friday in the 8-man ranks down in Kiowa County.
Yeah, and part of the feedback, Troy, and the membership on that was that let's try to vary the times a little bit, because for those folks who maybe are going to one side but want to try to keep tabs on the others, in a football perspective, and I don't directly work with football, but I've been here for a couple rounds of state finals. All of those state finals started and ended at almost the exact, they started at the exact same time and they ended almost at the exact same time. And I can tell you from a basketball perspective, I'm at one site, but I'm trying to monitor the other 6 sites on the NFHS network as well. So, and I'm not alone in that, because we have fans that are doing that same thing. So varying the start time was one of the things that came up in that conversation. And Mark Lentz is my teammate, and he works with football, and he can certainly probably speak better to that. But you're right, the game times were a part of the conversation and varying those. And as you well know, the Division II football playoffs are happening at that time, and Emporia State obviously has been in that mix, and they may be in the running for a playoff game on that Friday, which certainly complicates some things as well. So there's a lot happening when it comes to football and those state championships. But yeah, I mean that's you're exactly right. There's 9 state championship games going to be played at 3 different sites.
The state of college, or I should say high school athletics, it seems to always be changing, and that includes the varying things like such things as tournaments and the like. What's the biggest challenge right now for an activities association in what they're dealing with in terms of whether it be games, whether it be organizing schools, whether it be even looking at things that could be in the offing depending on a state, say, like an NIL?
Yeah, Troy, I think you could probably ask the employees that we have in our building, and you might get a different answer depending on who you talk to. So, there's certainly not just one single topic that's dominating the high school sports scene like it is in college right now with the NIL. And I'll be interested. I may have to tune in to hear the conversation you're about to have on K-State's women's basketball players and an NIL number, because I haven't heard that one. But, I think in general, kids are better when they're connected to their schools, and they're connected to their schools through activities. And some of those are athletically related and some of them aren't. And when it comes to the athletically related one, there's a lot more sports specialization than there used to be, which can take away from kids competing in other sports. And that's a pretty broad brush, because there are still a number of athletes who compete in a lot of sports. But like girls basketball, for example, that participation number around the country, not just in our state, is going down. So I think, there's a lot to pick from at the buffet of what's maybe the biggest challenge. But I think that's probably one where you're seeing a lot more focus just on a kid doing a sport or an activity, and not necessarily, having the same kid do multiple activities. And there's a lot of different conversations and things that come into play with that.
Let me pull the curtain back a little bit. When you and I were trading emails today, you were at a girls hoops symposium that involves the NCAA today, and it's not downtime for anybody in the Activities Association right now, is it?
Yeah, in my role, June is all about basketball, so I get to work with cross country in the fall, basketball in the winter, and track and field in the spring. And so you close the books as best you can on state track the last weekend of May, and then boom, you go right into all the summer basketball stuff. And as you well know, in the Centennial League and the different leagues that you cover around Northeast Kansas, we're getting ready to enter a 1-year shot clock trial for this coming season. So that's been the bulk of my June so far, is talking a lot about the shot clock, getting out and about around the state, talking to table crew, talking to ADs, talking to officials, and talking to players and coaches about the shot clock. And so far it's gone overwhelmingly well. And, people are basketball fans. And if you're a basketball fan, you know how the shot clock works. And there's certain nuances to it that we'll have to drive home that I've observed and others have observed. But yeah, you're right. This weekend is the NCAA Girls Scholastic event, the NCAA Showcase. There's 6 states that participate and send high school teams to it. It's Nebraska, Kansas, Oklahoma, Iowa, Missouri, and Arkansas. And it is an invitation event. And it's designed for NCAA Division I coaches and prospects to all come together. And I like this that the NCAA put in play about 3 or 4, maybe 5 years ago now, trying to put recruiting back into the hands of the high school world rather than the AAU world, where it is, still predominantly existing. But the concept of this event is it's a high school team environment, and college coaches get to see, the best of the best and the select team play, but that's a different environment than playing with your high school team. and college coaches want to see what those student athletes that they're recruiting are like playing with their high school team. What kind of rapport do they have with their high school coach? Because it's not often that they get to see that unless they go out and about during their regular season. And oftentimes it's not the head coaches. I should say oftentimes, but that's one of the duties that the assistants normally have, and the head coach can do it when he or she has time. So that's the girls' event was this weekend, and that's where I'm at today. And then the boys' event is at home field in Kansas City, same place I'm at today, and that's next weekend. So there is never a dull moment. Our staff doesn't get a summer vacation like some of the teachers and the coaches, the administrators get, and that's okay. I mean, I know that's what I'm used to, and that's what I knew I was signing up for. But yeah, it's there's always something happening, and that's just around my activities, let alone the other 31 activities that our office administers.
Kyle, I appreciate it. Have a good weekend watching basketball, and we will catch up to you soon.
Sounds great, Troy. Thanks.
Kyle Doborowski, the Assistant Executive Director with the Kansas High School Activities Association, joining us again. The changes that are coming in 26 to the Kansas State basketball tournaments will be that, yes, we will still have 7 classifications, but there will be 4 state tournament sites for the total of 14 tournaments. 4 sites for 14 tournaments. AJ, how's Illinois do it? Just out of curiosity.
So I haven't looked at it in a couple of years since I left high school, and ironically enough, it's now been almost 5 years since I graduated. Good God.
It moves quick, brother. It moves quick.
It does move quick. I mean, I just graduated college last month. I believe we have 6 classifications, and I believe my high school is now 3A. So we have 6 classifications, and we have kind of a regional system. So we start out in the regionals, we have sectionals, super sectionals, state semis, and then the state championship game. It's a little bit different than they do it here in Kansas.
Sure. And Colorado is a different beast altogether, too, in how they set it up and stack up the tournaments as well. And they've utilized the Coors Event Center the last few years for their 4 and 5A. Those are their largest classes. Mm-hmm. And they also still use the old Denver Coliseum for some of the
no kidding.
For the lead-in games before you get to the finals at the state tournament. But it is a much different bracketing situation than what we're talking about with what Kansas will be doing here in the coming years. By the way, speaking of those football times, the 6A football championship this coming year in Emporia is scheduled for a 2 o'clock kickoff on Friday, November 29th. Your Thanksgiving Friday is an interesting one, folks.
Yes.
4A then will be the next afternoon, and the 5A will be that following night, Saturday the 30th. Hutchinson with the 2, 3, and 1A in that order. The 2A will be Friday night at 6, the 3A Saturday at noon, the 1A Saturday on the 30th at 5. And Kiowa County, which I did not realize, they are the only turf field in the state that is set for 8-man football. Specifically designed and laid out for 8-man football. So they will have the 8-man and 6-player games on the Thanksgiving weekend, with the Division II Class 8 player taking place at 11 a.m. on Saturday the 30th. They'll squeeze all 3 of their games in that day. Now, that gets you just the rundown of what took place there with what those football schedules will look like when we get into November. Okay, it's almost all Coleman Hawkins almost all the time the rest of the way as the Cats get the commitment of the biggest name that was still in the transfer portal. We'll talk about that next as we continue on the game.
I started the Maine Frisbee Golf Club at Cornell.
The Game.
This is madness.
News Radio.
Host the ultimate backyard barbecue with Whole Foods Market. It's the Hot Grill Summer event through July 16th with sizzling sales on no antibiotics ever boneless beef ribeye steak and beef New York strip steak. Plus, check out sales on sustainable wild-caught Alaska sockeye salmon, organic strawberries, and more. In a hurry? Choose grab-and-go favorites like picnic salads and sushi, plus plenty of cooler-friendly beverages. Make it a hot grill summer at Whole Foods Market.
KMAN.
So, honestly, what was your Friday shaking out to be, say, about 8:45 this morning. I'm sitting here looking at the phone going, all right, I'm, about to close out this portion of the day, knowing I've got the secondary shift later in the day. AJ's in the same boat as I am today. By the way, it's just us. Mitch is out today. And I see this come across the timeline. Joe Tipton from On3, DY, friend of the show, Derek Young, at KStateOnline.com, retweeting it, that Coleman Hawkins had told LSU that he wasn't coming, was not going to make that visit down there. Immediately, everybody's attention goes, oh? And then, yes, it becomes a reality. Not all that long later, I saw John Rothstein's tweet about the commitment, but would you believe an NBA guy was the first to report it? No, not Woj. Sharms.
Of course it was Sharms. He reports everything. That guy reports literally everything. I'm not even joking when I'm saying that or exaggerating.
Sharms Charnia for The Athletic, formerly of Yahoo Sports. And, especially, he basically Woj. You don't want to call him discount Woj, but
he's Woj without the ESPN hierarchy on his rear end, I guess.
That would be a good way of putting it. So Charnia reported the news, putting that the earnings clock in as the highest known compensation NIL-wise for any college basketball player heading into the season, and proceeded to note that it was through agents Nate Conley of Court, XIV, and Aaron Turner of Veris Basketball. Okay, let's hit the stat numbers here. 6'10", 12 points, 6 boards, nearly 3 assists, team that reached the Elite Eight, featuring Terrence Shannon Jr., who got his own good news yesterday as his court case ended in Douglas County, and he was found not guilty of rape, sexual assault. Also, Marcus Domask was part of that Illini team. The NIL for Hawkins bumping in at $2 million.
Ooh-wee.
Did not see that coming. As much as we had talked about what was left in the tank for K-State in terms of NIL money, I did not see a $2 million price tag being involved.
I didn't either. And when I saw that number initially, I had to do a double check to say, wait a second, what? K-State spent $2 million on NIL? Wow.
So consider this. He was in the NBA draft process up until the week before he made his visit to Manhattan. He was considering trips to SMU, LSU, and Louisville. LSU was coming up this weekend. He had already backed out of the SMU trip before he came to Manhattan last weekend. Louisville had been in that mix, but again, I believe he had canceled that trip at a point as well and had effectively narrowed it down to K-State and LSU.
And I think we're not surprised he picked K-State by far.
Oh? I mean, I'm intrigued by the reasons.
Yeah.
Yes, I get the point that right now, yes, K-State, in terms of what this team has been overhauled into for this coming season, seems to be the one that you would expect to be the player in that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
LSU, though, is going to have a solid ball club. But when you realize now that he becomes the 9th player from the transfer portal that has signed on for K-State, what an offseason for this team. It basically is 2022 spring all over again, if you will, for K-State. Just that we're not waiting until the last moments, like we did that year, to fill out the final roster spots. Keontae Johnson was a very late in the process signee for K-State, commitment and signee for K-State.
I believe he got signed either in, was it June I think he got signed in?
I believe it was July.
Oh, July, yeah. I mean, like right before the school year started almost, too, it felt like.
Exactly. Plus, Desi Sills was late in the process. You get the idea. So now you've got the class complete. Besides Hawkins, you have Anseo, Doug McDaniel, Brendan Hausen. Hausen.
Hitman.
I think it's Hausen now.
Yeah, Hausen, I think is what it is.
I got to remember that. Hausen-Das. Anyway.
That's a good one.
Yeah, thank you. Bayfall.
Yep.
H4, Max Jones, and CJ Jones. That's the transfer portal class that is coming in to Manhattan. So you add to that the NIL in the mix, and most of the recruiting groupings, most of the recruiting sites now have the Cats comfortably in the top 25 in terms of the recruiting class.
Definitely have to agree with that. It's been a really good offseason for the coaching staff. You pick up Doug McDaniel at the start of the process. That was a pretty big pickup. Is it Onyensu, I believe how you say his name? He's got potential. He was in the NBA draft process too. Picked him up last week from Kentucky. Achor, the Joneses, and now you pick up Coleman Hawkins. Things looking pretty good right now for Tang and company.
One of the aspects of this that has caught my attention today in watching reaction on social media is from fans of other programs, not in the Big 12, but programs from the Big 10.
Yes.
And what their assessments on Hawkins are. And I know that there are those out there that are going to look at the numbers and say 12 points, 6 boards, 3 assists, nearly 2 steals a game. Okay, those aren't earth-shattering superstar numbers on the offensive end of the floor. But the general view of most of what I was seeing from opponents was that they were glad to see him move on out of the Big Ten because he's a defensive pest.
Yes.
And that is a big piece of what he's able to do. He's also been a steady improver in terms of his outside shot, 36% from 3 this past season. So all of this shows a veteran guy coming into the program to add to the mix who played at a high level, averaging double digits per game and really an effective double-digit per game plus solid rebounding edge that K-State would have as one of those players that will be looked to in the 5-out offense.
And Troy, he improves his foul shooting by 18% from last year.
Ooh.
Shot 61% in 22-23 from the line, 79% this past season. Upped his pointage, his points per game, upped his three-point shooting, upped his field goal percentage. Played a little bit lower, about a couple, like 0.2 on the rebounds, a little bit down on that, as well as assisted down a bit, but blocks about the same, steals were up. He just continues to gradually improve every single year, particularly on the defensive side.
This is going to be a fifth-year player coming into the program, and you expect that immediate impact. And, oh, by the way, what a challenge now for this coaching staff to figure out what a starting lineup is going to look like.
Exactly.
Oh, my.
You got depth, which is so critical, which was something they did not have last year.
So, next hour, I'm going to call upon Troy Coverdale, Devil's advocate, to weigh in a bit on this signing. But coming up next, we're going to address that NIL money, allegedly, as we continue on the game.
Your home for K-State sports.
We are in Manhattan, Kansas, where Wildcat fans are going wild, looking to take a big leap as they take on Missouri on FSN and Hideout.
This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.
Hey, we are just over a month away from the Olympics getting started.
Yeah.
The U.S. Olympic trials for swimming are this weekend.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where they are?
The trials?
Yeah. It's going to blow your mind.
Go ahead and just tell me, because I'm going to...
I had seen various mentions of it, but did not expect... I had seen someone mention, in an NFL stadium. Lucas Oil Stadium is where they're holding the trials. An NFL stadium.
Well, not only did you stump the Shaw on a Friday, you also surprised the Shaw a little bit there.
That's how big that event is this year. Holy smokes. Troy Coverdale, AJ Schaub with you on The Game as we continue on this Friday afternoon. The afternoon that saw the K-State scholarships line out with Coleman Hawkins agreeing to commit to the K-State program. The forward transfer from Illinois, 6'10", and how about that size that this team is going to have next year? Oh, my goodness. An NIL number of $2 million. Apparently, by the way, at least in terms of some sources that I have seen, that is booster driven and is not through the collective, through Wildcat NIL. Cannot confirm that. Nobody is saying officially, just that was one report that I did see online today in perusing details coming in. But it got me to thinking. See, AJ, you're not going to understand this as much as someone my age will, because we have lived through an era, those that are my age, where we saw the first $1 million contracts take place in professional sports. So let's have a little fun. Yes, it's not quite Stump the Shaw, but it is at least an interesting one, I think, in terms of just trying to lay out, when did we reach $1 million for a player in a given sport? Baseball was a gimme. It was Nolan Ryan in 1979. One of the aspects of that, I remember George Brett becoming the first $1 million Royal a few years later, and then we'll talk about that in a moment. But I got caught off guard by the fact that part of the fight for players between the old World Hockey Association, a.k.a. Edmonton's old league, before they became NHL, actually, they had the first $1 million contracts. Hockey did. Bernie Parent and Bobby Hull. In the 77-78 season, the two of them getting $1 million each.
The Golden Jet, also a Chicago Blackhawk legend, Bobby Hull.
Who, between he and Bobby Orr, shifting between the NHL and the WHA. Was interesting. And in Orr's case, it gave him the opportunity to play with his boys. Which was very interesting. Not quite Slapshot-esque, but the first player to receive $1 million for a season in the NFL really was a surprise to me. And of course he'd be a New York Jet.
Of course it'd be.
Oh, and a lame from the University of Texas as well.
Johnny Lamb Jones, right?
You got it. Well played. How did you get that one?
Just, I don't know. I don't know. When you said lame, I guess. I was thinking lamb, whatever.
Who remembers Johnny Lamb Jones? And no, it's not L-A-M-B. No, Lamb is in On the Lamb.
Great Olympian, speaking of the Olympics.
Yes, he was. But as a football player, no.
They thought they had the next Bullet Bob Hayes, and nope.
Oh, no. Signed after being picked second overall in the 1980 draft by the Jets. $2.1 million 2-year deal.
Wow.
All right, so we've hit 3 of the 4. In basketball, first $1 million contracts weren't all that far behind the NHL. Moses Fo Malone and Bill Walton were the first players to get $1 million contracts in a season, each exactly getting $1 million in the 79-80 campaign. But at that point, there was no ABA fight. It was strictly the NBA, unlike what was going on in hockey at the time with the World Hockey Association.
Yep. And then later with the USFL for a couple of years in the early 80s.
True, but and there too you get into 3-year $5 million for one player who would later be traded for 8 players, Herschel Walker. Yeah, his deal with the New Jersey Generals was by far and away one of the largest. And it would later play into the fact that the league won all of $1.
Yep.
Everything dies. Yeah. Anyway, I'm just leaving that there. So I noted George Brett becoming the first Royal to be paid over $1 million. And this is a piece of history that those of us who grew up in the 80s should remember quite well. The Avron Fogelman as part of the ownership of the Royals situation. It's part of what brought the $1.5 million deals to George Brett, Willie Wilson, and Dan Quisenberry.
Willie Wilson got $1 million?
Got $1 million contract.
Wow, I didn't know that. I figured I'm not surprised by Quisenberry, but wow.
Here's the problem. At the time that they signed, Wilson was already 30 and Quiz was 32. Mm-hmm. Then they tied it into Avron Fogelman's real estate dealings. The idea was that the contracts were tied to an apartment complex in Nashville that was called Stewart's Ferry. Because of what was then taking place in real estate, they were working to essentially get the money shifted around through the real estate company rather than the money coming off the Royals' books. In each case, only $25 million between the three over the lengths of the lifetime contracts would count against the Royal payroll. And it'd be investment, tax shelter, all that. This is where things went awry. It was real estate in the 80s.
Yes.
Fogelman eventually defaulted on a $34 million loan from Ewing Kauffman and was bought out of the ownership group. The Royals would then, shortly after that, go into a trust for multiple years, which then brought us David Glass and disaster because Ewing Kauffman passed away in 93, and things have not been the same since. Lifetime contracts, each totaling over $1 million for George Brett, Willie Wilson, and Dan Quisenberry. Oh, by the way, they all got settled well before what they were supposed to be settled for because, Fogelman's real estate dealings fell apart. On that note, I will touch on my leeriness over $2 million as a NIL payment to a player. Coleman Hawkins, in this case, being that player. That coming up in the next hour. The game continues in a moment.
Number you have reached.
Tweet the game, KMAN, or call 537-1350 and get in touch with the show. This is The Game on News Radio KMAN.